Welcome to Unintended Consequences. We're a podcast where we talk about the things no one wants to talk about. I'm Arden.
And I'm Diana Clark. And today we had an amazing conversation with Eric Kussin about his journey from the pinnacle of sports, back office, the financial piece, to what he considered to be a very, very deep, dark moment of despair, and how he came through that despair with some good advice, some terrible advice, and what that meant to him. Arden, I have a question for you as we're getting ready to air this. What was the one thing about his talking that resonated so profoundly with you?
I think the piece that to me was the most commonly heard that we hear from clients, and certainly I experienced in my own family, was this idea that you hear from experts what you're supposed to do for a treatment protocol, and that it's easy to live, even if you are a very high functioning person, it's easy to accept that almost unequivocally and live in a space where you know you're not yourself, you know you don't feel at your best, but you are existing for a long period of time until something flips it, which I love the part where he talks about, well, I won't spoil it, but where he talks about where that changes for him.
I also loved his definition of vulnerability. He talks, and I will go into this just for a second. He does it much more eloquently, but the idea that it is so much more than saying, hi, I'm Diana and I have ADHD. It is, I am Diana and my ADHD manifested in whatever kind of behavior, whatever difficulty, whatever struggle. And that is the definition of vulnerability, not labeling themselves.
I agree. Well, let's launch into the episode. Let's not hold our listeners back anymore. Welcome to Eric.
Hey, Eric. Thank you for joining us today to talk about your journey with mental health. I know you are the unintended person who didn't grow up thinking that you were going to be in the mental health space, and yet here you are.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is so many people that I meet, you find professionals who are in the space and it was a passion for them. In my case, I didn't think the topic applied to me, and then it decided to jump up and punch me in the face and told me it was going to apply to me, and then things grew from there. But I want to let everyone know before we go that Diana is the first person that I've ever been on a podcast with who had like step up to the plate music going, which is awesome to get her psyched up for this show. So this is going to be full of energy.
That's right. That's my goal. So let's take you back. I'm here with Arden O'Connor, and we really want to talk to you. Just set the stage a little bit. You were on this meteoric rise in an area that is pretty heady for a young man. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I grew up an athlete, and so played every sport that I could growing up. I was 4-sport athlete in 3 seasons, and you do that by kicking for the football team while you play soccer, so people can make their judgments on me if they want about that. Sometimes I ended up playing tight end as well, so I had like a field position. But I was captain of teams, I was winning scholar athlete awards, and so now what we hear about in the mental health space about accomplishments and stuff like that, and what is the drug of accomplishment, I didn't know from that back then. I'm a competitive person, and I love diving in head first and going hard at it. And so end up graduating high school, go to college at Cornell University, walk onto the basketball team there, have a great 4 years, and I'm 6'4" instead of 6'8". So I was not going to be playing at the next level unless I was a lot quicker than I am right now, and that was never going to be the case. Genes are what they are. And so I got my dream job. When you're talking about, going into competitive industry, I came out working for the NBA league office right out of college. And it was a department called Team Marketing and Business Operations. We were like the marketing think tank for the 30 at the time, NBA teams, sharing of best practices. And my role specifically, real dream job, was something called the business of basketball, which was presenting to the players on how revenues are generated. So it was around the time of Kobe Bryant and Amari Stoudemire and Kevin Garnett and all these guys who were coming out of high school directly into the pros. There was no rule to have to play in college. And so, I'm 22, 23 years old going on the road and explaining how tickets are generating revenue and sponsorship revenue and media rights and how that gets split up into a pie and how their salary cap comes as a piece of that pie. If the pie grows, their piece of the pie grows. And then, just to bring us kind of center on it, since you asked the question, from there, it was just an opportunity to grow the career. So we started a WNBA team out in Chicago. It was the first independently owned. For two women on the call, I could tell you I'm a huge female sports athlete and female sports fan, I should say. And that was back against the wall, right? Back to being competitive. You can't get this done. It's in Chicago, right after the Michael Jordan era. It's indoors at USC Pavilion over the summer. No one's going to go to games. All right, we'll prove it to you. And so did that for 3 years, out to Phoenix with the Suns to oversee their group sales department. And it was still with the WNBA as well, because we had the Mercury. So got a chance to win 2 championships with the Phoenix Mercury with a woman named Diana Taurasi. That might be a name that many know, and super inspiration. We would guard each other, and we had this squad called the Mercury Man Squad as a way to show that men can't necessarily keep up with these big time pros. And she's a shit talker, excuse my language, but she knows how to dish it out. Back to New Jersey with the Devils. So I was VP of Sales and Service with the New Jersey Devils for 4 years. We made a run to the Stanley Cup final, but didn't win.
How old were you at this point?
Yeah, so NBA until 26, 26 and 27 with Chicago, 27 to 30 with Phoenix, 30 to 34-ish with the Devils. And then to my knowledge, back to like the ridiculousness of the corporate ladder and how competitive we are with one another. I think at the time, the youngest chief revenue officer in major professional sports, I got hired by the Panthers, this new ownership group that came in. And I say that because how ridiculous that comment is, like that matters, right? Looking back on it, what age. But at the time, winning 40 under 40 awards and doing all these things, you're rushing. And you want to get to this ultimate dream job, which in that role, I'm one step away from being a team president, right? That's, if you're going to go down a path in the business side of professional sports, it's either commissioner of the league office might be the ultimate goal. Okay, there's only one of those. So president of one of the 120-ish teams, right? And so there's 120-ish of those. So, okay, so chief revenue is one, you're overseeing basically all the business operations instead of business and sports together in that president's role. So that was a peak of the sports career. Yes. 6 months in there so short. I know I don't want to tease too much, but 6 months into my time with the Panthers. And speaking of peak, because it'll help, set up the story. You're 34, single, not getting any state income tax, new car lease, new apartment rental, living by the water, making more money than you've ever made before in your life. What could be wrong, right? That's what I was thinking at the time. I landed exactly where I should be.
And then
I'm waiting for the tee ups, right? So again, 6 months into my time there, it was amazing. The ownership group, it's the team that just won the Stanley Cup final. So same ownership group as the first year that they owned the team. Military guys, West Point background. And so I loved being part of that culture. It's an accountability culture. And I was the only one from our C-level suite who had sports background, right? All of them had military or Goldman Sachs or other industries. And so I was kind of given the keys to, hey, go run with it. Let's build the culture the way that you see fit. And so I'm 6 months into my time there, and all of a sudden I start to lose interest in things outside of the office. Not interested in going hang out with my friends after work. I'm not interested in watching my teams on TV in other markets. I'm not interested in playing in games competitively. I'm not interested in going to the gym and working out. And I'm coming home from work every day, kind of hitting the couch before even getting to bed. That's how exhausted I was, falling on the couch, waking up at 3 a.m. to remember that I had to get another 3 decent hours of sleep on my actual bed, and then come back and rinse, wash, repeat, do it all over again. So that lull, I'll call it that. And I was just making excuses because at the time I said, oh, this must be the world's way of telling me I need to focus even more on my job. Oh, everything else is going away. I've got this important role that I worked hard for. This must be someone up above or whatever our belief systems are telling me, like, focus, focus, focus. And the interesting thing was, and I think what this will resonate with people, even though those other things weren't working for me, I didn't have interest in them. My focus on work was okay. I was able to go in the office and get things done until eventually that started to escape me as well. And I would be looking at my computer trying to read emails, and I couldn't synthesize what was taking place on the screen. And my hand to eye coordination in terms of typing on the computer, it was like my brain and my body weren't connected with one another. And I remember like trying to do things, walk around the office, which I was never someone to leave my desk, but like, okay, if you take some deep breaths, they always say, take deep breaths. Doing that, not working. I'm taking a lunch, which I never did. I'm driving 25 minutes away to get away from where everyone was, to roll my seat back, because then I knew I have 10 minutes to just tune the world out, to drive the other 25 minutes back to then get back in the office. And eventually it hit a point where I had a game where I had asked our reps to invite prospects into a suite. We call it the prospect suite. And so there are 25 reps, each inviting 2 people. So add that up, that's 75 people. Those 25 plus their 50. Our team owners there, our team presidents there. And I'm supposed to say something, because when you're a chief revenue officer, you're supposed to be the chief cheerleader, right? We have Roberto Luongo, who's a Hall of Fame goaler, Alexander Barkov, who just got drafted, Jonathan Huberdeau is one of the top scorers in the league. Like each of these things I could tell you right now, so many years later, 8 years later, 7 years later. But back then, nothing's coming to my brain. And I remember getting up in front of everyone and saying, hi, my name is Eric Kussin. I'm the chief revenue officer with the Panthers. And then my mind just goes blank. Like someone just turned a light switch off. And as much as things had been fuzzy before and, putting sentences together were difficult, this time it was like my brain basically said to me, you're not continuing anymore. You're stopping right now. And it wasn't my decision. And I just remember saying, this is Matt, our team president. I'll take it from here. I went back to my office. Vinny, the owner, came up to me at the end of the game. I just remember staring off like, I don't even care who won that night. He's like, Eric, is everything okay? So what happened in the suite? Just know we're here to support. So this is beginning of 2015, when no one was talking about these things openly, at least, especially in that industry, but military guy, right? So he's probably seen this. And so he doesn't know what it is. I don't know what it is. I'm purposely using it as the word. I'm being vague because I think that it might be a traumatic brain injury from the time I was a kid playing sports, and now it's just manifesting. It might be a brain tumor that's pushing on an area of my brain that's stopping me from being able to have faculties and executive function and communicate properly. It might be as ridiculous as it sounds, I thought it was maybe an aneurysm, like that I just haven't died yet, but it's like floating in my brain and doing damage. That's how dysfunctional I felt. And he just said, take as much time as you need, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. We love what's getting built here. You'll come back, you'll hit the ground running. And so from a support perspective, I had the best support that you could have from the person at the top. And when I heard 3 months, my mind is saying, who's not getting better in 3 months? Like, and I don't know, you were shaking, Diane. I don't know if that means it was a lot or a little. At the time, 3 months sounded like an eternity to me, because you have mono, it's a month. That's a really long time to be off work. You watch the pharmaceutical commercials, and 4 to 6 weeks to kick in. So you're thinking, I've taken meds before for antibiotics. I've never taken for up here, but all right, if one doesn't work, I'll try another. If another one doesn't work, I'll try another. That's 3 rounds. Who's not going to get better? And so I left everything in Florida, came back to New York. It's where my parents have their house. My parents are teachers. I'm trying to set a picture for I don't want to make it seem like I was neglected at all. We have a modest house in a lower to middle class house. My twin bed is still the bed that's in my childhood room growing up. 6'4", that doesn't exactly mix well with, but this is where I'm sleeping. But I'm in New York because, and you have to be careful how you say these things, but I believe the top doctors at the time are the Columbia, Harvard, Cornell, Penn trained doctors that I'm going to go to. And that's who I find. I find these top doctors, and psychopharmacologists are who I'm recommended to go see, people who mix cocktails of medications together. And my first appointment was, and I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, so I won't say, okay, so Eric, you have a shitload of depression on top of a shitload of anxiety, and you need heavy artillery for it to be knocked out of you. And heavy artillery means that I left with 5 prescriptions. to be used altogether. An SSRI, a booster to the SSRI, like an Abilify, Seroquel, a benzodiazepine, and then an off-label drug that was supposed to support all of them.
Was that all that was suggested? Was there any therapeutic regimen, any talk of residential stay, changes in diet, any
Nothing
of
on
that?
residential,
No.
nothing on changes in diet. There's what I still see on the websites, which we'll certainly get to. There was, let's complement this with talk therapy specifically. So the two gold standards, so we hear, talk therapy and med management. Now, when you have the discretionary income to be, I don't have a family at this point. I don't have people to support. And I'm living in my parents' house as much as I'm still paying the rent on my Florida apartment. My thought is, I'll go to whoever the top doctors are. I don't care if it bankrupts me for whatever I've saved in sports. Get me back on the field, coach, right? I want to feel better. And in the model that currently exists where you believe med management and talk therapy are your best options, well, what it led to was 2.5 years of absolute dysfunction, laying in a bed, staring at the ceiling. You could see my energy level. Now it's not my natural spot to be in, waiting for one of 52 different combinations of psychotropic drugs to kick in. And the way that they explained it to me, which made me the perfect customer for a system that I again, got to be careful in how I explain it, but saw me as someone that could keep coming back and keep trying, was they showed me SSRIs, SNRIs, MAOIs, and tricyclics. And they said, we're going to start up here with a bunch of these because we think that serotonin's the issue. But if not, it may be norepinephrine and serotonin, so we'll try the SNRI. And if not, some of these older label ones, there's some people who are treatment resistant, will go to those as well. When that's given to you as the game plan from the beginning, off the heels of you take amoxicillin and penicillin when you get the strep throat or bronchitis or pneumonia when you're younger, your mind thinks, I'm doing all the right things along with the one therapy that they're telling me to do. And to your point, Arden, of did they ask you to do anything else? My sessions of talk therapy were an absolute mess. I would come into the office and the doctor would look at me and say, tell me about how you're feeling. And I'd go, I'm just numb. Can't feel anything. I'd be like, well, I need to hear more from you, Eric. I don't have more to give. Like, this is all I can tell you. There's no thoughts coming to my mind.
And how long would you continue sessions like that? Are you doing this for the full 2 years of just every session is just the same thing?
Yeah, no, great question. And I love that you're going into detail about this because most people, when I'm sharing it, they skip over these things. And obviously it's what you guys do for a living. So it makes sense that diving into it. So I try to be careful of naming names, but I was seeing a psychopharmacologist and then a psychiatrist who was trained in psychotherapy. So that psychiatrist who's from one of the top hospitals in Manhattan, okay, is the one who recommended the first psychopharmacologist that I'm seeing, but they're not in practice together. Mm-hmm. And this guy, the psychiatrist, is the one who's engaging in the talk therapy with me. And so I'm going to see him once a week. I'm seeing the psychopharmacologist once every 4 weeks. So that's my pattern. And I would show up coming from Long Island into Manhattan, and sometimes our appointment would only last 10 minutes because I was literally that dysfunctional. Like, he didn't have any other strategies, any other methods.
What's amazing to me, the reason I'm asking is that this isn't the first time, in my own family story, my brother was on probably 25 different meds. And I vividly remember a psychiatrist in California. I turned to him and said, how do I support my brother? I'm his older sister. He's got an addiction issue. He's had it for years. He said, convince him to come see me 4 times a week for the next 2 years. And my head in that moment paused and was like, that's the only solution, is for him to just come in, see you. And maybe that is, in his mind, the best way to treat my brother. In my mind, I'm thinking, gosh, that's a pretty good guaranteed customer. And so the reason I'm pushing on it is because I think some of the families we see, when they're exhausted, they say they have seen the psychologist, they've seen the psychiatrist. And then what happens is the family looks like they're the ones being difficult, when in fact, they have felt failed by the system. And if you don't stand up, or someone doesn't intervene and say, you know what, I've come here for 6 weeks and nothing's changing. I'm paying you the money. The meeting is 15 minutes and I'm not seeing an uptick in energy or interest. Honestly, how long does that go on for? What is the thing? And I guess in your case, what would have bettered it?
They have the perfect racket going on, because when they say 4 to 6 weeks and then they say some meds agree with some people, they don't agree with other people. But then here's the really insidious part, is the therapist and the med management person aren't in the same practice. So they start pointing fingers at each other as you're not getting better. You're caught in the middle going, who's right, who's wrong? Are they both wrong? Are they both right? And you're in a place where you can't make those decisions. Even if you have someone helping you, it's their first time trying to navigate this system that is not set up to help us. So you're caught in the middle. And the thing is, you think you're doing all the right things because they've shown you the list and because they've said talk therapy is the gold standard. So you're like, I must have to keep doing this until whatever. I thought of it as, I wasn't even thinking hardware, software. I literally pictured my brain at the time as a soup of chemicals, and that they were putting in different ingredients to try to make the soup go back to tasting how it originally was. That's what I thought. So if that's your understanding, this whole chemical imbalance thing that they sell, and that's all that's wrong, you think you're doing all the right things by putting in the new ingredients. And you're obviously, your sympathetic nervous system is revving up because you're like, am I damaging my brain so much to the point where you don't know what a sympathetic nervous system necessarily is at the time, but you're going, what's wrong with me? Like, if I put a new chemical in, a new ingredient in, will my soup never taste the same again? So am I doing further damage to myself? And they don't explain that an SSRI is a reuptake inhibitor. It's not a synthetic form of serotonin itself. It's blocking the reuptake, which is a whole nother thing we can get into. Like, so none of this is explained to you. You literally are sold that you don't have enough either serotonin or norepinephrine or dopamine. And when they get into the dopamine one, that's where you get into the whole, we should try Wellbutrin, right? And so that, and I'm not knocking meds, by the way. I don't want anyone to think like meds have their place in helping people, whether it is a symptom management piece, whether you call it a crutch or you call it a brace that helps you then do more of the work, which we'll certainly get into. But the problem is meds are sold as cures to us. So when we're on the outside and we watch the pharmaceutical commercial and you see us, I mean, they've simplified it down to being a blob with a sad face and a gray cloud above it. It's not even limbs anymore. And then the blob gets a pill introduced to it, and then 15 seconds into the 30-second commercial, the blob becomes a smiley face, the clouds go away, the sky is blue, the birds are chirping, everything's great. They have created the perfect funnel for, okay, the people who have it, back to the it, this is what you take to get better. And then the insidious part is all the people who don't have the it do nothing because they look at that commercial and they go, if that ever happens to me, if I ever genetically get it because I'm just predisposed to it, look at what happens. You just take one of those pills and get better. So I don't need to work on it. They've created the perfect funnel system into, and now you see why 25% of the United States population, at least the latest numbers that I've seen, are on psychotropic drugs, twice any other developed country.
So how did you get out of this spiral? Like, what stopped it for you?
All right. So after 2.5 years, a doctor tells me to do TMS therapy. Again, not knocking TMS therapy, but okay, for folks, they put a coil on around your head or they put a helmet on your head, depending on how invasive. And they hit this thing called the motor threshold and your thumb jumps and they know that they've hit the right spot. And so they tell me 30 sessions of this at $350 a session. So I come every single day, back to your point of creating customers, and I'm not feeling any better, back to advocating for yourself. I'm telling the practitioner, you got to wait. It's only session 15. It's only session 18. On the 23rd session, it's a good thing because I have this pill bottle, so I can explain it. I'm sitting at 4 a.m. on my hands, shaking my legs because this bottle of pills is in front of me, full bottle, and my mind is going, swallow the bottle, swallow the bottle, swallow the bottle, and I can't stop myself from that thought. And I guess my prefrontal cortex had been developed enough at that point because I'm 36 at this point instead of, let's say, 22 or 8, where we're losing some people to suicide at such young ages, that I'm able to notice there's a wrestling match going on in my brain right now. And one of the wrestlers, the one is really strong, is this, I call it a magnetic pull towards self-harm. It's a thought I've never had before, but I can't stop myself. That's why I'm sitting on my hands. And so I say to my parents, you got to take me in somewhere. So I go inpatient to Cornell Med. What do you know? Another, right, Ivy League institution. I get transferred after the ER to their Westchester facility. And the attending psychiatrist is what? A Harvard-trained doctor. And she looks at my chart. She looks at all the meds. She said, 52 meds, TMS therapy, your last resort. And those are 2 words that I don't think a patient should ever hear. your last resort is to do ECT, which is electroconvulsive therapy or shock therapy. And when you're at a psych ward floor where people are walking around in circles talking to themselves and having hallucinations, you think, I'm the most messed up of the messed up people on the planet, that I'm here now. And if this doctor's telling me it's the last option that I have to heal, I have to do what she says. You don't have friends to call up and say, hey, Arden, when you got shock therapy, what did it, there's not that option. So getting to how it got better, unfortunately, that period did not. 5 weeks of 12 sessions of ECT, getting my brain shocked into seizure. And I leave the hospital no better than I had the 2.5 years prior, thinking my life is over unless Merck or Pfizer invents some miracle pill, because that's all I know that there is at this point in terms of healing. Where it flips is my parents, being both educators, they go to these continuing education courses all the time. So they went to this one course called Integrative Breathing Practices. And I didn't know what the term integrative meant, so I didn't think much of it. And breathing practices, I already breathe every single day. So why do I have to? And so they go, and my mom went because she was having a pain in her neck, and my mom never does like holistic stuff. She goes and she happened to know the woman who was teaching the course through another woman, and she comes home that night. We met this Dr. Donna. She's a psychologist. She treats differently than all these other doctors. Can you go see her? Can you go see her? Okay, so 3 days later, I go. And I'm expecting your listeners will definitely resonate with this. I'm expecting the appointment to go in the 3 segments that every other mental health appointment goes. Arden, nice to meet you. What are your symptoms? Arden, based on your symptoms, here's your diagnosis. Arden, based on your diagnosis, here's how we treat you. And instead, she sits back and she goes, Eric, the couch is your stage. It's your one-person stage, and I'm your one-person audience. And I don't want you to have to answer any other question other than this one for the whole rest of the hour that you're here. What's the story of your life as you tell it to yourself? And I'm emphasizing tell it to yourself because I could have watched your life from the outside and I could have my own take on what you've been through. And I want you to share it all with me. Share the good things, share the bad things, share the amazing things. You can go in order, out of order. You could scream, you could curse, you could look at the wall, you look at the floor, you could punch the pillow. There's no rules. Ready, go. And she just sits back. And what comes out of me, it'll take me a minute and a half to tell you, but it took me 50 minutes to tell her. I'm the middle of 3 boys, so you have some sports and toy memories when you're 4 or 5 years old. And I get up to age 9, and then this is my life from 9 to 23. So my older brother first breaks his femur bone, is put into a body cast for a year and homeschooled because you can't move in that body cast. Gets it off, goes back to school. Month in, he gets diagnosed with ALL, which is a children's form of leukemia. So he has 5 years of chemo and radiation, which in the late 80s, early 90s, not the best prognosis. But miracle, he goes in remission. We're all celebrating. Month later, he's in a Jeep Wrangler with his friends. Friend bought like a used car that didn't have a inspection on it, so there's no seatbelts in the back. Kids doing what they do, trying to distract the other drivers behind them. My brother flies out of the back since there was no seatbelt, lands his head on the parkway, cracks his orbital bone, loses partial vision in his eyes, in ICU for a month. Heals from that, goes to college. Junior year, he's feeling a pain in his knee. Same cancer from childhood's come back. Now that it's come back, they have to give him a stronger dose of the chemo, which fortunately the drugs are stronger now 10 years later. So it's lowering the white blood cell counts, which is what we wanted to do. But his body's breaking down all of his healthy cells also. We see him hunched over. He's going to law school now at this point. I'm up at school. I get a call from my father, come downstate to meet us at the hospital. Todd's got 105 fever. Go to the hospital. The neurologist tells us his body's gone into septic shock from the chemo treatment. Septic shock, he falls into a coma. And now we don't know if he's ever going to wake or have any brain activity. So that goes on for 3 months. I'm driving back and forth between school and the hospital. Parents are living at the Ronald McDonald House. Miracle, he wakes after 3 months, full cognitive faculties, but his kidneys fail from being in the septic shock for so long. So he needs to go on dialysis. We all get tested to see who's the closest match. My father is donating a kidney to him. That's all successful. I get that first job at the NBA, and first 3 years, 3 of my close friends, unrelated to one another, pass away back to back to back, either misdiagnosed or undiagnosed heart conditions. So one guy collapsed on a treadmill, one guy walking with heavy boxes up a flight of stairs, another guy in his sleep. And I share that level of detail when I come on shows like this from a vulnerability standpoint, because what the doctor said to me, because she stopped me with 10 minutes to go in the session. She said, Eric, hold on. What else happened to you as a child and a young adult, since we only have 10 minutes to go, that impacted your mental health that I need to know about? and call it ignorance, but I'm telling you that this is the same misunderstanding in most schools and offices that I go into now. My reaction was, what do you mean impacted my mental health? I've had a chemical imbalance the last 2.5 years from 32 to 35. You asked me about my life. I started at age 4. I got up to age 23. From 23 to 33, that's a 10-year span that I was in Phoenix, New Jersey, and Florida. And I was fine running sports teams. That didn't impact my mental health. And she gives me this analogy. She says, if you were an NBA executive and you had a nice suit on and these 7-foot athletes are running up and down the court and sweating as they do, and the sweat flies off them and hits you as they run by you, or they dive for a loose ball and they land in your lap, your suit's going to get all sweaty. And after a 3-hour game, you're going to go home, put the suit away for the dry cleaner, put on a nice new suit after showering, and go in the next day like you weren't sweat on the night before. She said, you had a front row seat, but it wasn't for an NBA basketball game, it was for the game of life. And the game of life was represented by your brother in a muddy wrestling ring, and then your friends in a muddy wrestling ring next to him. And every move they were making to stay alive against his game of life, the mud was splattering and hitting you like the sweat from the other example. But the biggest difference here is you were focused on everything else in the arena. You knew the wrestling match was going on. You weren't noticing how this mud was hitting you. And what you did was you sat there not for 3 hours like the game, 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, 30 years, 35 years, you've been sitting in that same seat as that mud's been caking up on you. That's called chronic stress and trauma. And it's changing how you're operating physiologically and biologically and the connection between your brain and body. So you're a ticking time bomb. I'm surprised you're here at 33 or 35 as opposed to in your young 20s, given what you shared with me. And when she gave me that analogy and explanation, I said, Donna, that makes sense, but it doesn't make sense for the rest of society. And she said, what do you mean? I said, okay, fine. I went through all those things, but if you're saying having a front row seat for watching things happen to other people in our lives, that I didn't need to be in the car when my brother got in the accident, that I didn't need to be the one who was in the coma myself, then fine, take me out of the equation of 35, take your average 15-year-old. And I just started listing, like, watching your parents get into fights and get a divorce, watching your parents lose their job and lose the house, watching your two best friends get into a fight and you never speak to them again and they're at odds with each other, watching your friend being bullied on the schoolyard or verbally abused by an adult, or your friend confiding in you that they're sexually abused, or they're dealing with the sickness of a loved one like I was, or a loss of a loved one at a young age, or one that's very common now because we have these larger families that are beyond these extended families, watching your older grandparent and your parent is caregiving that all, and how it's weighing on both of them. It's like, I don't know a 15-year-old, let alone 35, 55-year-old, 85-year-old who hasn't dealt with one, some, or many of those things. If that's what mental health is, that means everyone's mental health has been impacted. And that's not the message that's out there. The message that's out there is that there's a group of people who have it, going back to the it, and there's a group of people who don't. So hopefully that gets you to where now I'm on the path towards understanding what's going on with me. I haven't gotten into yet the healing part of it, but my eyes are opening up at this point. Like, I missed all of this for my 35 years of my life, and specifically the 2.5 years I was trying to heal. No one explained this to me. How's that possible?
I do have a question. So you sort of discovered that everybody has it. 5 out of 5, as you're known for saying, 5 out of 5 have it. We all have mental health. It is the varying degree of health or ill health, right?
Yes.
So we all have it. Yeah.
But like the fact that is not common understanding, when you don't go, I don't have physical health because I didn't have a stroke. You have a hangnail, your physical health is impacted. You turn your ankle, your physical health is impacted. You have sneezing because you have a cold, your physical health is impacted. That's so common. And yet they've sold us on, because if the understanding of a continuum is adopted, that means there's proactivity and working on things. That means fewer people going and getting to the places of crisis where they make the most money. And so we're like, this is getting more into the minutia of it, but look at what just happened at the Olympics. And you look at the difference between the way Noah Lyles shared his story versus how Simone Biles shared hers. And I'm gonna say that I love how Simone Biles shared, and I think the way that Noah Lyles shared is just doubling down on the existing erroneous messages that are out there. He put out a tweet after he wins the fastest man in the world, fastest human in the world, I guess, if you will, 100-meter, and he says, I have asthma and dyslexia and ADD and depression, and I was able to win, so you can get over anything too. So all he's doing is raising his hand and going, for those of you who've been diagnosed like I have, you can overcome. What's that telling everyone else who hasn't been to a mental health professional? It's not you that has it, so don't worry about it. But those of us that do, we can overcome. Where Simone Biles puts out her documentary before it, brilliant move by her marketing team, by the way, but they put it out right before the Olympics, and you hear about her rape with Larry Nassar. You hear about how her brother was on trial for triple murder and how what's that weighed on her. You hear about her being in an open arena in 2021 during a COVID era when there's usually fans in the building and the whole world is watching her and she doesn't have the fans to interact with. Like, this is the mounting stress and trauma that has built in her system that leads to the thing that gets called the twisties. It's a dysregulated nervous system that leads to the twisties, but that's not what the common understanding is, right? So she's helping us to learn, what do you go through? He's helping us learn, what do you have? And the what do you have is what the common language is right now. It's the currency that athletes and entertainers get rewarded for by the BetterHelps and the Calms and the Headspaces and the Talkspace of the world. If you say you have depression and anxiety, now we will give you an endorsement deal and you will make hundreds of thousands of dollars going on the speaking tour. There is no incentive for vulnerability to bring people together.
What would vulnerability really look like? We can talk about this all day long, but what does it look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll show a slide when I present. So I mentioned Noah Lyles, but I'll give you the opposite of it, then I'll go to it. So the biggest celebrities that we know in the mental health space, Kevin Love, the basketball player. What do we know about him? He had anxiety and a panic attack and ran off the basketball court in the middle of a game. Kate Spade, what do we know about her? She died of suicide. Anthony Bourdain, what do we know about him? He died of suicide. Dak Prescott, the quarterback for the Cowboys, what do you know about him? His brother died of suicide and he had depression during the pandemic. Michael Phelps, depression and suicidal ideation, okay? Even if you want to go more obscure, Jonah Hill, body dysmorphia. All we're learning about mental health is that it's the celebrity name plus the disorder plus erratic behavior, or in the case of Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain, loss of life. Vulnerability is talking about what you've been through, the X's and O's of what your life experience has been that's led to this place of dysregulation that leads to these symptoms that then get called these disorders. Sorry that I'm very like I have a strong opinion on that. There's the doctors that I talk with, there's no disease found in the body for depression. There's no disease found in the body for anxiety. This is all a buildup and accumulation over time. And each of us have different genetics. So how it manifests over time in each of us is slightly different. But to wrap my arms around the people who have, let's say, schizophrenia or bipolar, which is considered the most severe, I say to them, I don't judge you any. Your hallucinations, person diagnosed with schizophrenia, is like the person with anxiety and their inability to get up in front of a room because they're sweating and they're shaking and they can't talk in front of a group of people. I don't think any less of you because your symptoms seem more severe. They're just symptoms of the same underlying piece of what's happened to all of us. That's what gets the 5 and 5 out there. And the thing is, when you talk to a group of people and you share what you've been through. So take the generalities of my story, not the specifics. A sibling getting sick, not ages, not what sickness it was. The concept of cancer generally. A organ transplant happening either in your family, to a cousin, to whoever it is, okay? Friends getting sick or passing away. I didn't give you the specifics. Do you know how many people those things apply to? What is that? 75% of the population? So then you add to that someone who adds a story about sexual abuse, someone who adds a story about growing up in a foster care system, right? When you share what you've been through, this answers your question directly, Diana. That vulnerability is what welcomes people in because they can no longer go, I don't have that label. That's not me. They hear your story and they go, holy shit, he or she is telling my story right now. These mirror neurons turn on for us and go, that's welcoming me into this conversation right now. And even the people, I call them the 1970s gym teachers who have the bike shorts on and their arms are folded like this.
I had that gym teacher.
Yeah, okay. That's the profile of the person who will not open up. And you know that you've got them a little bit because even when they're in the back like this, and you're presenting through lived experience as opposed to through a lens of clinical psychology as the first starting point, and they're going like this, and they're looking at the screen, you know you're capturing them. And all you're hoping to get from that is that you've pierced the veil a little bit on, this is a topic that does apply to you. And this stuff is building in you, and it may lead to fibromyalgia, diabetes, cancer that you don't think is this mental health thing. But guess what? It's building up in you over time, and it's creating change in your body. So I'm not here to be the one to say that you need to work on this today, but I am doing a disservice to the rest of your group if I'm not bringing up how it impacts every single person in this room. So I hope that answered your question of the vulnerability piece. That's why I love the Simone Biles. It's like, Theo Fleury, who's on our alliance, the hockey player, he was raped by his male coach over 150 times when he was 15 years old. That's the story that he leads with, not I'm Theo Fleury with CPTSD. He doesn't want to be the poster boy for the label. He wants to be the poster boy for, I went through something awful, and then even though I made $50 million in my NHL career, I had to drink, drug, sex, and gamble all my money away because I didn't know how to live life on life's terms because of how much emotional pain I was in at the time.
I love it. All right. So just in the interest of time, I'm going to ask you, give us a couple of the anecdotes or the maybe the crowning glory moments of your healing path. Like you back in the office with that therapist who sounds like she was transformational for you. What did the healing journey look like? And did you assume I'm just going to go back to where I was? When did you start to say, maybe I'm going to do something different with my life?
And I love that your mind thinks chronologically the same way, because it's usually how I tell the story. Like, yeah. All right. So she says, I love that you're thinking about how this impacts other people. Can we put a pin in that and help you get healthy first? Okay. So she sends me to a weekend breathing course, 3 days, by the Art of Living. If you've heard of IAHV, it's called the Happiness Course. The strategy that they're teaching you is called the Sudaharshan Kriya. Okay. Now, for anyone who's hearing that, it sounds like mumbo jumbo coming out of my mouth. I show up to this course. I'm the only man, only one under 40 at the time, and only one born in this country. So it's me and 8 Indian women and 9 yoga mats. Okay. So back to, I don't do breathing practices and I don't know what they're for. I'm not thinking much of this. And I go up to the practitioner. I say, I breathe every single day already. How is breathing going to help me? Explain this to me. And this was the early point of kind of my understanding of when Donna, the doctor, said physiology and biology. So I'm learning in this course about the vagus nerve first. And that vagus nerve term gets thrown out a lot there. But okay, deeper dive. I'm asking questions. What about the vagus nerve? Well, Eric, it connects the brain with the vital organs. And it goes through your neck. So guess what? Your breath is the carrier messenger that when your eye sees something and your brain processes that something, your breath changes and it goes down and sends a message to the rest of your organs. Something's different than it was before. We watch an accident together outside and we go, we're running away from someone. We go, that's a lot different than I was just sitting here and having a conversation over a podcast, right? So that understanding, and then the understanding, this is overly simplistic, but if we think of our vagus nerve in these 2 branches that go down, if we think of them as rubber bands, that over time, as we breathe like that, or hold ourselves closer, tighter, more in the fetal position, scared of the world coming at us, I call us, when we're going through things, it's like we're a boxer that's in the defensive position because life is punching at us. Well, you're constricting yourself. That rubber band substance is now becoming like a ruler. So when they talk about losing vagal tone, that's how I try to describe it to people. If air goes down your vagus nerve through your neck and it vibrates down that rubber band, it can tell the rest of the body what to do. If air hits that vagus nerve and it thuds out, I don't want any scientists to check me on this because it's not, when we talk about acetylcholine and all these ways in which the vagus nerve actually changes its tone, but think about that concept. And that concept then resonated with me because I was like, okay, if I do this rhythmic breathing pattern, my rulers can go back to being like rubber bands and I can have this greater connection between my brain and my body. The crowning moment to your question, more specifically, Arden, is I'm doing this for 30 days in a row, 45 minutes a day. I'm feeling no better, but we have this accountability group where we're giving each other pounds in the text message that we did it that day. And my 8 Indian friends have become my best friends on this text message thread and I'm speaking with. And then I wake up on the morning of the 30th and 2 feelings came back to me that I didn't have for 2.5 years. One was that I was hungry and wanted to make scrambled eggs for breakfast. So a craving for a certain food. And then the other one was that I wanted to turn on TV and watch the news. And these are things that I had not had any interest in the 2.5 years prior. And once that happened, I was like, okay, I'm back online. Like my brain is now emotionally, I wasn't back online. And I'd still argue today, I've got a lot of work to do emotionally, but at least cognitively, I was back online. And so I'll pause there because I know you further questions, but it was kind of like, all right, I figured out that there's now this process towards healing. Breathing can't be the only thing. There's got to be other modalities out there. It hits on your first question. Well, all they did was therapy, and what did therapy look like, and how did they ask you to come in? I was thinking to myself, I go to the gym for my body, and there's not only a treadmill and then nothing else. There's all these pieces of weight equipment. What else is there besides breathing if breathing helped me? And that became kind of the path I decided I want to go down. Oh, you asked the question, what made me not go back? So I went to, I won't mention their names because then even though I do work with them, I went to the largest nonprofits in our country for mental health. And I thought, if I'm going to go back and be the selfish guy selling in sports again, I got to at least take what I learned from this and give what I did to a nonprofit. And I've got relationships with athletes and folks in the entertainment industry from having worked. I'll hand those contacts off and then I'll go back to working in sports. And I see 3 things on all these websites that are consistent. This is in 2017, it's 2024 now, and nothing's changed in 7 years. And it certainly was the case before this. Those 3 things are, they all start with the statistic 1 in 5 people are mentally ill. So back to the binary, who has it and who doesn't. Second thing was all their campaigns for normalization are an action word followed by stigma. Stop the stigma, stomp the stigma, break the stigma, erase the stigma. Baseball has strike out the stigma. Hockey has slap the stigma. Tennis has hit the stigma. You see where I'm going with this. The term stigma doesn't mean that my phone or this marker has done anything wrong. It means human beings have formed unfair opinions and judgments about other human beings. When you say stop and break and stomp, that means you're shooting a cannonball across the bow going, you're being mean to those of us who are affected. You need to stop doing what you're doing. That doesn't bring us closer together. That pushes us further apart. But yet that's the most common campaign that's out there, something stigma, right? And then the third thing was, it goes to the celebrity piece. The websites didn't have endorsement deals with the Britney Spears and Lindsay Lohans of the world. So they were saying, you're not alone. Britney Spears is part of the 1 in 5. She's got depression. You're not alone. Lindsay Lohan is part of the 1 in 5. She's got anxiety. But then they linked to the Us Weekly or People magazine articles and say they didn't have the endorsement deal. Britney Spears has depression, shaves her head. Lindsay Lohan has anxiety, dresses like a hot mess. So our billboard for understanding what mental health is that it applies to 1 in 5 people. We need to coddle and not be mean to that 1 in 5. And if you want to know if you're in the 1 in 5 with Noah Lyles with them, do you run off the basketball court in panic attacks? Do you say crazy things about your family like Kanye West and think you could run for president? There's not many people raising their hand going, that's a part of the group that I'm at. And the reason why they end up in all of our organizations is because they didn't think it applied to them. They didn't think it applied to them. And all of a sudden, what I described earlier, it punching me in the face. There's no proactive work in mental health. Oh, we've got an EAP at our company if you want to use it. And then 6% of the company uses it and 94 don't. We're 40 years behind with mental health where we are with physical health. When Richard Simmons got up on stages and started sweating to the oldies, and Jane Fonda in her leg warmers got women working at, like, that's what we need, is a movement towards proactive gym for the brain work. And I could go, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but let's just powers that be and the money that can be made on keeping us in this reactive model. That's why things are staying the way that they're staying.
So were you just compelled, given what you were seeing, to say, I'm not going back to the prior industry and I'm going to dedicate my time to this?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you. I got so passionate about the drug of helping people, right? Like, don't get me wrong, the Panthers just won the Stanley Cup, and I'd love to have that ring to go along with the one that I have from the Mercury, the two that I have from the Mercury. I would give up that ring any day for one person coming up to me after a talk and going, "You, not even you saved my life, you changed my life." Like just that, there's no greater currency than helping other people. That's a drug that I'll live off the rest of my life. And so part of that, by the way, you guys can answer this question. Sometimes I'm like, am I truly altruistic if I get something out of helping people?
Oh, yeah. Everybody says this. There's no unselfish deed.
I think we're built for that.
Yeah, I think so too.
We are, but we should have to like pick up manure for a living, and then someone's life gets better because we did something that we didn't really like. That maybe is true altruism, but then when I've written that, people are like, just do it. If it's helping people, just do it.
There's enough sadness in the world, however it is motivated by, you just take it and do it. I guess one of the questions, given sort of your past history, are you a go-to person for people who are in the sports and entertainment field who are struggling? And do you see any trends there, like with entertainers and athletes in terms of mental wellness and being able to accept help?
Yeah, the sports world is also at a I'd still say on the scale of 1 to 10 of where we need to be, they're at like a 4. So we have partnerships, for example, with PGA Tour, okay, with the Dallas Cowboys. So these large organizations that look for us for content, educational programming, and tools. Here's the problem. The NBA and the NFL in 2019 required that every single team hires a mental health professional to live with the team, literally be employed by the team. What I say to these people all the time is, does anyone come to your office? No, I got to walk out there and try to, okay, what happens when you walk out there and try to normalize it? They still don't come to me. There's not culture bridges that are being created to help the players understand that going to seek help is not because you're getting a label slapped on you.
Because you're not one of them.
Yes, exactly. You just nailed it, Diana. And so there's a check the box thing that's gone on with sports now because they've been required to do it of let's have a mental health professional on site. I don't see the proactive programming. And I would even take it a step further and say former players should be used as the culture bridge to help connect. And hey, guess what? I didn't think this applied to me. And then I kept getting asked for tickets for my family. And they said, oh, you're making all this money now. Why aren't you giving me some of it? And then I had girlfriends on the side and not to get, these are the things they deal with. I had a mistress or whatever, and that started weighing on me. And I had a child with someone else. These are the things they need to talk about. And they're like, nope, because if I get that label on me, I'm not getting that contract.
Well, and that's the question is, to me, structurally, does it make sense to have a mental health professional employed by the team? Because, we hear this all the time. You have a psychologist in an office. Sometimes that model works if there's a really open and accepting culture of millennials who are excited about therapy. But sometimes people are like, I am not going into that office to go complain about my boss or to complain about what's going on with me, when that person, even if HIPAA exists, you may not believe it. So I've got to imagine that's magnified. The stakes are way higher in sports. And culturally, I got to imagine you got a bunch of 20-year-olds who probably aren't, they aren't thinking about therapy anyway. And so if they're going to accept it, I kind of come back to, geez, wouldn't it make more sense to have a network of providers outside the team that you say, hey, here you go to? How you get them, maybe the players are the bridge there. But to me, a mental health professional employed by the team is like, who's going to use that?
Well, so you're nailing. I'm going to give you the chronology of how this all came about, since you like chronology. So the NBA Players Association. So the NBA is a league, and then the NBA has their teams. Then there's something called the Players Association, which is the union for the players. People hear NBAPA, they think it's the same thing. No, it's the representative group that represents the players. Before this requirement for the teams, the Players Association hired a Dr. William Parham from UCLA to build a network of providers in each of the teams' markets for the players to be able to go to. Why do you think the teams decided to hire their own mental health professionals? That information's staying here. We need that information for making the best decisions moving forward. Now, when you're a player, you're going, what the hell am I supposed to do? The coach is looking in the eyes and seeing that I'm dragging right now. He's telling me to go see someone about it. I don't want to relent and say that I need it. I just got to say I drank a little bit too much the night before. I was out a little bit too much with my friends. And then they're caught between a rock and a hard place right now. So the bigger picture answer is, and we're not there yet, is it shouldn't matter. The GM and the owner should go, we all go through shit. Talking to someone is part of being in life, just like you're going to you're being human. Just like we send you to stim on your knee, you should be going to the person that working on your brain, and you're not one of them if you go to that. But we're not there yet. So something's got to give, and it hasn't given yet. And you've got these entities kind of almost staring each other down, going, we're going to keep the info. No, we're going to keep the info. And I just keep telling the leagues, the only way that changes is when you hire the players to come and be the culture bridge, not only for your players themselves, for your management, for your team, for your owners, so that they understand how this applies to all of us.
Because what's interesting is you do have performance coaches who come in and talk about mindset. So it's not like they're opposed to all of the psychology.
But
it's
they
just
look
when
at
you get
two buckets. It's
yeah,
two different
and
buckets.
so it's so interesting. I went to Harvard Business School, and I remember talking to a friend, and I opened the conversation. She was talking about a breakup with a boyfriend. She was not in a good place. And I opened the conversation by saying, I've had a therapist. I've had them for years. I gave her the story of why I started. And I said, look, I said the same analogy you did. I go to the gym for my physical health. Why wouldn't I go to an objective resource? Not my mom who's going to tell me everything's great and it's everyone else's problem, but it's somebody who's going to help me look at my own behaviors. And when I said, why don't you consider a therapist? She said, I'm not crazy. I don't need a therapist. I had just said I would see a therapist. So I laughed and I said, oh, well, of course not. You're not crazy. And I said, well, would it be better? And I literally said it just like this. Would it be better if it was a performance coach? Would you feel better if I suggested an executive coach? Yeah, that I could do. And I remember thinking, wow, it's just in the wording. Like we all need something similar, but it's so interesting how people get so worried about what that means about them. So,
well, and here's the downside though of the when we're acquiescing and changing the wording to fit to get people into the funnel. So Calm, the app, did a major endorsement deal with LeBron James. What did they position around? Mental performance, mental toughness, vision training. And so think about the difference juxtaposed to one another. When you're sitting on the court and visualizing how you want the game to be played, guys go, okay, I'm willing to do that. When you explain to them that they're carrying around this invisible backpack and there's things that they need to take out of that invisible backpack so the weight isn't as heavy, they go, all right, we're stopping there, right? So the comfort level of performance training is, yeah, I'll do that. Now, the key to bridge that is to explain to them, tell me if this analogy is helpful to you or you think it would work out there. This is what I share with athletes all the time. I say, if you were asked by a coach to jump on plyometric boxes and they were like, we need to increase your vertical leap, and you did it for 5 days and you're sweating and you're cutting your knees as you're falling on the block and you're looking at coach like, I'm not getting any better. And then all of a sudden, the 6th day, your vertical leap goes up 1/4 inch. And then 2 weeks in, it's 1 inch. And then a month in, it's 2 inches. And you're like high-fiving. You're like, I'm going to grab more rebounds. I'm going to spike more balls. This is amazing. Well, what if I said to you, while you were doing that, there was an invisible backpack with 15 pounds of bricks in it, that your 2-inch could have been 3 inches or 4 inches. So all you're doing is celebrating that you've improved performance, not thinking about how much more performance could have improved if you had worked on how heavy that bag was, right? Now, all of a sudden, you get into their mind, you go, you're not looking at the whole picture. You're only looking at how you're getting better, not how much better you could get. That's where they're willing to then start to work on the stuff from the past. But it's uglier and it's heavier and it's more difficult. And so they avoid it oftentimes.
So, yeah, it is a great analogy, the bricks in the backpack. So as we close up, because we ultimately do have to close up, as much as I would like to spend the afternoon with you, what would be one saying that you would laminate and carry in your pocket? What's the one phrase?
Mine is that everything in life is about perspective. And that might sound really cliche, but it gets talked about with mindset coaches all the time, like, oh, one door closes, it's just an arrow towards another door. But if you literally think of every difficult event you've been through in your life, and I'm talking about things that we sob over, the loss of loved ones, right? And if you think about it through the lens of what is this bringing me towards that's making me better, fully understanding that that thing that I lost is going to be painful for me. And I'm not I don't like the David Goggins approach of you're tougher than that, forget that it existed. Like, you have to acknowledge that there's grief in the loss of an idea or a person or whatever it is. Acknowledge the grief, but go from that pain, how am I now looking at this situation differently? And I think, what's that saying that life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass, it's learning how to dance in the rain. That's the most beautiful thing there is, right? It's like, I wish that I still didn't go into freeze modes of my nervous system. I would pay all the money that I have to, but I go back there. So I got a position to go, what gift is that giving me? It's allowing me to go help people who are in that place and explain to them, you're not stuck there forever. That's a gift that I get from the misery of that's the only way it makes sense in my mind that I still have to go through it.
One of my favorite quotes of all time, and I quote this all the time, is Desmond Tutu's, and I'm going to destroy it a little bit, but it is, we can't save our children from pain and struggle, because pain and struggle are the anvil on which character is formed, where we learn empathy and compassion. And every time I think of that quote, I'm like, yeah, every hurdle.
I mean, there's people like that who their descriptions and their eloquence, right? Like, and I want to believe it's because they sit there and they write it down, but maybe it just comes to them beautifully in their mind. Who knows? And then we just take it, like you said. But you, it sounds like you nailed exactly how that was written. Yeah, I mean, I just look at that and I go, the pain that people feel, and then the compounding pain that people feel, and then why do we divide people into categories, and why do hurt people? It's all because we're not appreciating that perspective of what we go through, and we're letting the pain determine what our next steps are. And it's utopian, but what a beautiful world it would be if it was like, I'm acting like this to you right now and yelling at you because I'm mad that someone else did something to me. Be like, oh, okay, we'll let you chill right now. I won't get mad back at you for doing that to me then.
That would be nice. Well, I want to thank you, Eric. Appreciate your candor. And I love your passion about this subject. I love your neuro geek self. I love the way you describe things. So thank you for this.
Thank you. Thank you guys for putting the platform together and for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Big thank you to Eric today, not just for his story, but for the wisdom that story imparted. And also, if you like this episode as much as I like this episode, and that's a hard thing to know, please like us on your platform of choice, shout it from the hilltops, send it to a friend, make sure you subscribe. And we look forward to talking to you again next time.